The dark side of the moon was silent, covered in gray dust and broken metal. The wreck of a small alien ship lay half-buried, its hull glowing faint red from the crash. Smoke rose in thin lines, vanishing into the black sky. The only sound was the steady breathing of one man, Ethan Cole, a human engineer from Earth's exploration crew. His oxygen meter blinked low, but he kept moving. Ethan had seen the crash from orbit. His commander told him not to go, too risky, no backup, but Ethan couldn't leave someone to die. So he came alone, landing near the wreck with only a flashlight, a toolkit, and one spare oxygen mask. Inside the wreck, everything was twisted and burnt. The air smelled like hot metal and ash. His flashlight beam cut through the smoke and stopped. There, against the wall, lay a girl. Not human. Her skin was faintly silver blue, her hair like soft strands of light. She was small, fragile-looking, and barely breathing. "Hey, can you hear me?" Ethan called, kneeling beside her. Her eyes fluttered open, large, bright, almost glowing. She made a weak sound in a language he didn't understand. He could see her chest rise and fall, slow and painful. The oxygen around them was too thin for her lungs. Ethan checked his own meter again. 15% left. Not enough for two. But the look in her eyes, fear, confusion, and something like surrender. He didn't think twice. He unclipped his oxygen mask and pressed it gently over her mouth and nose. She struggled, thinking he was hurting her. Her hands, small and trembling, pushed weakly against him. "Easy, easy," he whispered. "Breathe. Just breathe." The mask hissed softly. Her eyes widened as air rushed into her lungs. She coughed hard, gasped, and then inhaled deeply like someone drowning and finding the surface again. Color slowly returned to her face. Ethan smiled faintly. "That's it. You're okay now." But he wasn't okay. His lungs burned as he pulled short breaths through the thin atmosphere. Stars danced at the edge of his vision. He leaned back, dizzy, watching her breathe through the mask that had been his. The girl blinked, her silver blue eyes focusing on him. She reached out, touching his face carefully. Her fingers were cold. She whispered something that sounded like a prayer. Then, with shaking hands, she tried to give the mask back. Ethan shook his head. "Keep it," he murmured, barely able to speak. He looked around the cabin. There was no second mask, no working system. His radio crackled, but then went silent. He was alone. The girl seemed to realize he was fading. She moved closer, pressing the mask between them, trying to share it. One breath for her, one for him. Her lips brushed against his as they passed the mask back and forth, sharing the same air, their breaths mixing. It was strange, almost unreal. Each time he breathed, he could feel her warmth, her heartbeat near his. Her hand rested over his chest, trembling but steadying him. In that quiet, broken ship, it felt like time had stopped. Then the alarm on his suit screamed, a warning. His oxygen level had dropped to 1%. He had to get out. He pointed toward the open hatch, signaling for her to follow. She nodded weakly. Together they crawled through the smoke and out into the pale light of the dead moon. Outside, the horizon was endless gray. Ethan's ship was a few hundred meters away. He tried to stand, but his knees gave out. The girl caught his arm, her body shaking but determined. She spoke again in her soft, alien voice, her words quick, worried. He couldn't understand, but he understood her meaning. "Don't give up." They stumbled across the rocks. Every breath burned. Ethan's vision blurred and the ground tilted. He fell once, twice. Each time, the alien girl helped him up, even though she was weaker than him. Finally, he collapsed near his shuttle. The door was open, the emergency lights blinking. He smiled faintly. "We made it," he whispered. The girl knelt beside him, tears shining on her cheeks. She pressed the mask back over his face and held it there, forcing him to breathe. He felt her hand on his chest, steady, desperate. The world faded into silence. When Ethan woke, everything was white light. His lungs hurt, but air filled them again. He turned his head and saw her, alive, sitting beside his bed, breathing normally through a clear tube. Her eyes were on him. "You saved me," she said, her voice halting, but in English now. Ethan blinked. "You speak?" She nodded slowly. "The healers taught me. You gave me your breath. Now, by our law, you are my bondmate," he frowned, confused. "Your what?" She smiled softly, eyes bright with something he didn't understand. "When one shares breath to save another, our lives become one. It is sacred. It cannot be broken. Ethan stared at her, trying to process the words. His breath quickened. He had just wanted to save her life, but somehow, in her world's law, that act had changed both of their fates forever. When Ethan opened his eyes again, the air smelled strange, sweet, cool, and heavy with energy. He wasn't in his ship anymore. He lay on a soft bed made of glowing fibers, surrounded by tall silver walls that pulsed like living skin. The ceiling shimmered with blue light that moved like waves on water. He tried to sit up, but his arms felt weak. Tubes ran from his wrists into small crystal devices. His oxygen helmet was gone. As he blinked, shapes moved near him. Aliens, tall and graceful, with smooth skin that shifted in color when they spoke. Their eyes glowed softly like stars caught in mist. One of them noticed he was awake and spoke in a flowing language that sounded like wind and bells. Another hurried out. Moments later she appeared, the alien girl from the wreck. Lyra. She wore a pale robe that glowed faintly under the light. Her hair floated as if underwater, strands catching every shimmer of light. When she saw him, her eyes widened with relief. "You live," she said in broken English, her voice soft but clear. Ethan exhaled, still dazed. "Yeah, somehow." He looked around. "Where am I?" "In the Hall of Healing," Lyra said. "You saved me. My people brought you here." He rubbed his temples. "You nearly died out there." "You should rest," she smiled faintly. "It is I who should say that to you, human." Then her expression changed, serious, uncertain. "But something has happened." "Something. Binding." Before he could ask what she meant, two tall aliens entered the chamber. They wore silver armor and long, flowing sashes marked with glowing symbols. One of them spoke sharply to Lyra in her language. She lowered her head. "What's going on?" Ethan asked. The armored alien turned to him, his voice deep and formal. "Human, you have shared your life breath with one of royal blood. The ritual is ancient. The bond cannot be undone." Ethan frowned. "Ritual? I didn't do any ritual. I just gave her oxygen." The alien's tone grew stern. "You shared breath directly, mouth to mouth. That is the sacred rite of Zatel, the union of life forces. By our law, she is now bound to you." Ethan blinked, stunned. "Bound? You mean like married?" Lyra looked at him, eyes trembling. "It is our law. You gave me your breath. Now your life and mine are linked." He sat in silence. His mind spun. All he'd wanted was to save someone, not marry them. "That's insane," he muttered. "Where I come from, helping someone doesn't make you—" The alien guard interrupted. "The council must decide your fate. You will speak before them." Lyra's face paled. "No, please. He saved me." "He did not know." The guards ignored her and motioned for Ethan to follow. His legs were weak, but he stood. As they led him down the shining corridor, he glanced at Lyra. She pressed a hand over her heart and whispered, "Do not be afraid. I will stand with you." The council chamber was vast, like a cathedral of light. Columns rose to the ceiling, carved with flowing lines that glowed blue and gold. 10 alien elders sat in a half-circle on floating platforms. Their robes shifted colors like waves of oil on water. When Ethan entered, the murmurs stopped. The air felt heavy, sacred. One elder leaned forward. "Human, you performed the breath union with the Princess of Zaylor. Do you deny this?" Ethan hesitated. "I didn't know it was a union. I only wanted to help." Another elder spoke sharply. "Ignorance does not erase sacred law." Lyra stepped forward, her voice trembling but brave. "He saved me. Without him, I would be ash in the void. He did not seek this bond. I offered the mask back, but he refused. He gave it to me freely." The elders murmured among themselves. The eldest among them finally spoke, voice deep as thunder. "The right cannot be undone. The law of the ancient stands. If the bond is true, it will hold. If false, it will break within 1 moon." Ethan frowned. "What happens if it breaks?" The elder's glowing eyes fixed on him. "Then you will both die." The chamber fell silent. Lyra gasped softly. Ethan felt a chill spread through him. "So either we're stuck together, or we both die trying?" The elder nodded once. "Yes, your lives are one now, human." Later, Lyra led him to a quiet balcony overlooking a glowing city. Floating platforms drifted between towers of silver light. Far below, rivers of energy ran like molten stars. Ethan leaned on the railing, still dizzy. "You're really a princess?" She nodded slowly. "But it means nothing now. The bond makes us equals. You are my mate by the oldest law of my world. He shook his head half in disbelief. Your people must hate that. They fear it, she said softly. A human in royal blood. It has never happened. They stood in silence for a long moment. The stars shimmered above them, reflected in her bright eyes. Finally, Lyra turned to him, voice quiet but firm. Ethan Cole of Earth, whether you wish it or not, our lives are now one, and the Council will test it soon. Test it? How? He asked. She looked away, her expression troubled. They will make sure our bond is real, even if it means putting us both through danger. A cold wind brushed the balcony as Ethan stared at her, realizing that his act of kindness had tied him to an entire alien world, and a destiny he never asked for. The next morning, Ethan woke to the sound of distant bells. The light in his chamber shifted from soft blue to gold, mimicking dawn. Alien attendants moved quietly, placing silver trays of fruit that shimmered like glass beside his bed. But Ethan had no appetite. He still couldn't believe it. He was now legally bonded to an alien princess. He sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing his temples. Every breath he took reminded him of the strange truth. His oxygen had saved her, but now their lives were connected. The more he tried to make sense of it, the less it made sense. When the door slid open, Lyra stepped inside. She wore simple white robes now, her long hair braided with glowing threads. Her eyes met his with a soft guilt. You are awake, she said gently. Barely, Ethan muttered, still trying to figure out if I'm married, arrested, or both. Lyra looked away, troubled. You are not in prison, but you are not free either. Comforting, Ethan said dryly. And this bond thing, how real is it? Lyra hesitated, then placed her hand on her chest. When we share breath, our life energies connect. If one grows weak, the other feels it. When you slept, I felt your pain. When I breathe easier, you breathe easier too. Ethan stared at her, half in disbelief. So, we're linked? Like, literally? Yes, he sighed. That's fantastic. He didn't sound thrilled. Lyra stepped closer. The Council will test our bond soon. They will watch us, study our reactions. If they think the union is false, they may what? Her voice grew small. May separate us by force, and that could kill us both. Before Ethan could answer, the doors opened again. 2 guards entered in silver armor. One of them, tall and rigid, spoke sharply. The Council calls for the human. He will answer before the High Court. Lyra's eyes filled with fear. Please do not hurt him. The guard ignored her. Ethan stood, straightening his torn jacket. It's fine, he said quietly. Let's get this over with. The courtroom was vast and bright, filled with alien officials seated in rising rows. Their robes shimmered like molten metal, and their eyes glowed with judgment. At the center stood a tall figure, the High Chancellor, whose crown was made of living light. When Ethan entered, whispers spread through the chamber. That is the human? One voice hissed. The oxygen thief, said another. The one who dared the breath bond, murmured a third. Ethan stopped in the center under the harsh beam of white light. Lyra stood beside him, her face calm but pale. The High Chancellor's voice boomed through the hall. Human Ethan Cole, you performed the sacred breath rite with Princess Lyra of Zaylor. Do you understand the gravity of this act? I didn't perform anything, Ethan said firmly. I gave her oxygen because she was dying. Yet you touched lips. You exchanged life force. That cannot happen by chance. Ethan clenched his fists. Where I come from, that's called CPR, not marriage. A ripple of confusion passed through the crowd. The Chancellor raised a hand. Our laws are older than your world, human. You cannot break what was sealed by the breath. Lyra stepped forward suddenly. Please, my lord. He is innocent. The fault is mine. I accepted his gift without knowing the cost. The Chancellor's eyes narrowed. Would you deny the bond, Princess? Lyra's voice trembled. No, I only wish to protect him. The chamber fell silent. The Chancellor's expression softened slightly. Then let it be tested. The trial of harmony will begin at dusk. If your bond is true, the crystals of life will glow. If false, they will shatter, Ethan frowned. And if they shatter? Then neither of you will survive the night. That evening, Lyra found Ethan sitting on the edge of a balcony, watching the alien sun sink behind the shining towers. The air shimmered gold and pink, and far below the rivers of light pulsed like living veins. She walked to him quietly. You should not sit alone before the trial. Ethan smirked faintly. Hard to enjoy the view when I might explode by midnight. She sat beside him, silent for a moment. You are brave. My people think humans are dangerous, wild, but I see something different. What do you see? He asked softly. Someone who gave up air to save a stranger, she said. Someone who still jokes when his life is at risk. Ethan looked at her for a long moment. I didn't plan to save a princess. I just saw someone dying and couldn't walk away. Lyra smiled faintly. That is why the bond chose you. He blinked. The bond chose me? Yes, she whispered. Our ancestors believed the breath finds the right souls. It never happens by accident. The air grew quiet between them. The alien sun dipped below the horizon, leaving only silver light. Lyra looked down, her fingers brushing the railing. If the crystals fail tonight, I want you to know, I am glad it was you. Ethan stared at her, caught between confusion and something deeper. You really believe in all this? She nodded once. Belief is all we have when laws are stronger than hearts. He exhaled slowly. Then I guess I'll believe too. Just this once. As night fell, the bells rang across the city. Guards arrived to escort them to the Temple of Crystals. Lyra reached for Ethan's hand, her touch warm and trembling. Whatever happens, she whispered, we breathe together. Ethan met her eyes, steady now. Together. They stepped into the glowing temple side by side as thousands of alien eyes watched, waiting to see if the bond of a human and an alien could truly hold. Or end them both. The Temple of Crystals stood at the edge of the Zalar capital like a mountain of light. Its spires reached the clouds, glowing with shifting colors, blue, silver, and deep violet. Thousands of alien citizens filled the plaza below, whispering about the strange trial. A human bonded to their princess. No one in living memory had seen such a thing. Inside, the vast hall shimmered with floating lights. At its center was a circular platform made of transparent stone, surrounded by hundreds of glowing crystals. They pulsed softly, alive with energy. Ethan stood beside Lyra, trying not to show how nervous he felt. His reflection shimmered faintly on the crystal floor, distorted by light. He whispered, So, this thing, it's just going to tell them if we're bonded? Lyra nodded slowly. The crystals sense truth. If our bond is pure, they will glow. If it is false, they will darken and shatter. Ethan raised an eyebrow. No pressure then, she smiled faintly. Breathe with me, Ethan, that's all we must do. The High Chancellor's voice echoed through the chamber. Begin the trial of harmony. The hall dimmed. The only light came from the crystals, floating slowly around the pair like stars. Ethan swallowed hard. Okay, what do we do? Hold my hands, Lyra said softly. He did. Her palms were warm, trembling. The crystals drew closer, their glow pulsing faster with each shared breath. The air around them thickened, charged with unseen power. Now breathe together, she whispered. Ethan took a slow breath in. Lyra mirrored him perfectly. The crystals brightened, soft gold, then white. Murmurs filled the hall. The Chancellor raised his staff. Continue. Lyra closed her eyes and Ethan felt something shift inside him. A strange pull deep in his chest, like his heartbeat matched hers. He could feel her emotions as faint echoes. Her fear, her hope, her quiet strength. The crystals began to hum, filling the air with a low, beautiful sound. The light wrapped around them both, swirling in patterns like dancing fireflies. Ethan's breath caught. It's working. Lyra opened her eyes. Because it's real. But suddenly a sharp crack split the air. One of the largest crystals turned dark, then shattered with a thunderous sound. The hall gasped. Ethan flinched back, breaking the connection. Lyra staggered, clutching her chest. The light around them flickered wildly. Wait, Ethan shouted. She's hurt. Guards rushed forward, but the Chancellor raised a hand. Do not interfere. The trial is not over. Lyra fell to her knees, gasping. The remaining crystals circled faster, glowing dangerously bright. Ethan knelt beside her, his heart pounding. Lyra, breathe. Come on, breathe. Her eyes fluttered open. Don't. Stop, she whispered weakly. If you stop, I die. Ethan gritted his teeth. Then I'm not stopping. He grabbed her hands again, closing his eyes, forcing his breathing to match hers. His lungs burned, his chest felt tight, but slowly, the wild lights began to calm. The shattered crystal reformed before their eyes, its pieces rising back together, glowing pure white. Then another joined, then another. The hall fell silent as all the crystals turned bright gold, pulsing in rhythm with their heartbeats. The Chancellor lowered his staff. It is done. The bond is true. The hall erupted with noise, cheers, cries, disbelief. Some bowed. Others looked away in fear. Ethan barely heard any of it. He looked at Lyra, still kneeling, tears on her cheeks but smiling faintly. You did it, she whispered. No, he said softly. We did it. The Chancellor stepped forward, his expression unreadable. The breath bond between human and Zaylorian has not been seen for 10,000 cycles. The Council accepts its truth. Lyra bowed her head. Thank you, my lord. But the Chancellor wasn't finished. And yet truth alone does not silence doubt. The nobles whisper that the bond was forced, that the human used trickery. Only one path remains to prove your unity. Ethan frowned. And that is? The trial of survival, the Chancellor said. 1 moon cycle in the Great Red Desert. Alone. If you endure together, the bond will be honored forever. If you fail... He paused. The desert will decide your fate. That night, Ethan stood with Lyra on a balcony overlooking the endless desert beyond the glowing city. Red storms moved across the horizon, flashes of lightning in their depths. He let out a dry laugh. You guys really love your trials. Lyra's voice was quiet. The desert is not just a test. It's alive. It can sense fear, weakness, even lies. Many never return. Ethan turned to her. And we have to survive that. For a month? She nodded. Yes, but we have one thing others don't. What's that? Lyra looked at him, her eyes soft and sure. We already survived each other. Ethan smiled faintly. Guess that's something. The alien wind howled in the distance, carrying the scent of sand and danger. Tomorrow, they would enter the Great Red Desert, 2 lives bound by breath, tested by a world that didn't want them to exist. The Great Red Desert stretched endlessly under 2 suns. Waves of scarlet sand rolled toward the horizon, glittering like crushed fire. The heat shimmered so strong it bent the air, and the wind sang through the dunes with a voice that sounded alive. Ethan squinted against the glare. The desert was nothing like he'd imagined. It felt like another planet entirely, empty yet watchful. He adjusted the straps of his survival pack. His oxygen tank was low, his throat dry. Beside him, Lyra moved gracefully despite the weight of her silver robes. They had been walking for hours since dawn. The temple guards had left them at the border, leaving only one instruction. Survive 1 moon cycle. The desert will judge your bond. Ethan kicked at the dust. I hate deserts, he muttered. Lyra smiled faintly. The desert hates everyone equally. He gave a small laugh. Comforting. The heat rose around them like a wall. Each breath tasted of iron and dust. Lyra stumbled once, and Ethan caught her by the arm. Her skin burned with fever. You need water, he said. So do you, she replied softly. But the desert gives only when it chooses. They found a cluster of crystal-like rocks and decided to rest in their shade. Ethan lowered his pack and sat heavily, wiping sweat from his forehead. He watched Lyra kneel beside him, her eyes half closed as if listening to something he couldn't hear. What are you doing? He asked. Listening, she said. The desert speaks. It tells me where life hides. Ethan frowned, looking around at endless red sand. If it's hiding, it's doing a great job. Lyra smiled faintly, then pressed her hand to the ground. After a moment, she pointed toward a distant ridge. There, beneath the stones. I can feel moisture. Ethan stared at her. You can feel water? Our kind was born from this desert, she said quietly. It remembers us. By dusk, they reached the ridge. Ethan pried loose a few stones with his tools, and beneath them the sand was damp. A few inches deeper, he struck something solid. Small roots tangled around a glowing blue plant. When he broke it open, water spilled out like liquid glass. Lyra smiled as he handed her the first handful. You see? She said softly. The desert tests, but it also rewards. Ethan took a sip himself, the water cool and sweet. I'll take that lesson any day. As night fell, the temperature dropped sharply. The sky turned deep purple and twin moons rose over the dunes. Lyra sat near a small fire Ethan had made from the dried crystal roots. The flames burned pale blue, casting ghostly light over their faces. You humans, Lyra said softly. You breathe so fast, always rushing even when still. Ethan chuckled. Yeah, we don't do well with patience. She looked at him curiously. Why did you come to this world? He hesitated. I was an engineer on a survey mission. We were supposed to map unclaimed systems. I didn't expect to find This, Lyra tilted her head. And now? He looked into the strange blue fire. Now I'm married to an alien princess in a desert that might kill us, so that's new. Lyra laughed quietly, her eyes bright under the moonlight.
You could have left me to die, Ethan. Why didn't you?
He didn't answer right away. Because I couldn't, he said finally. I don't know why. It just felt wrong. Lyra studied him in silence. Our people think humans are reckless. But maybe that's what makes you powerful. You act before fear stops you. Before Ethan could reply, the ground trembled slightly. The fire flickered. Both of them looked up. A shadow moved across the dunes. Long, serpentine, massive. What is that? Ethan whispered. Lyra's voice dropped to a whisper. Sand beast. The guardian of the desert. The creature's shape shimmered through the dust, its scales reflecting the moonlight like molten metal. It circled slowly, drawn by the sound of their fire. Stay still, Lyra breathed. It senses heartbeat and fear. Ethan froze, every muscle tense. The beast stopped, its head rising from the sand like a mountain. Two glowing eyes fixed on them. Then, lightning fast, it struck. Ethan shoved Lyra aside and rolled, grabbing a flare from his pack. He fired it straight into the beast's open maw. The explosion of light and sound echoed through the desert. The creature screamed, its body twisting before diving back into the sand and vanishing. Silence returned, broken only by their breathing. Lyra looked at him, wide-eyed. You fought a sand guardian, she whispered. No one does that and lives. Ethan exhaled slowly. Guess it didn't get the memo. She stared at him a moment longer, then smiled, soft and full of wonder. You are unlike anyone I have ever known. He grinned weakly. You're not so bad yourself, princess. As the night deepened, the two sat by the fading fire. The air cooled and the stars above looked close enough to touch. Lyra rested her head lightly on Ethan's shoulder. Maybe the desert has accepted us, she murmured. Ethan looked at the endless dunes and the twin moons hanging above them. Let's hope it stays that way, he said softly. Because somewhere out there the sand still moved, watching, waiting, and the true test of their bond had only just begun. The red horizon shimmered as the twin suns rose again. Ethan and Lyra stood at the edge of a high dune, their silhouettes sharp against the light. The wind carried the dry whisper of sand, sweeping their footprints away almost as soon as they made them. They had survived 29 days in the Great Red Desert. 29 days of heat, hunger, and endless danger. Ethan's clothes were torn and faded, his skin sunburned, but his eyes were steady. Lyra's silver hair had turned dusty gold under the sun, yet her spirit glowed brighter than ever. The last night they'd slept under the open stars, side by side, their hands barely touching. They didn't need words anymore. Their breaths moved in perfect rhythm, one heartbeat echoing the other. Now, the silver spires of the Zaylor capital glimmered in the distance. Ethan squinted. We actually made it, Lyra smiled weakly. The desert has judged. It allowed us to leave. That means it accepts our bond. He gave a small laugh, shaking his head. Hard to believe. A month ago I didn't even know your name. She looked at him gently. And now? He hesitated, his voice low. Now I can't imagine not knowing it. For a moment, silence hung between them, filled with warmth deeper than words. Then the ground trembled beneath their feet. Lyra frowned. What was that? Ethan's eyes widened as distant shapes appeared on the horizon. Shadows of flying ships. Dozens of them, glinting silver under the sun. Those aren't rescue ships, he said grimly. Lyra's face paled. No, that's the royal fleet. When they reached the city gates, the crowd erupted in disbelief. The human and the princess, both alive, walking out of the desert arm in arm. Whispers rippled through the streets like wind through glass. The bond held. They survived. Impossible. A human in royal blood? Ethan ignored the stairs, helping Lyra climb the steps of the high hall. The doors opened with a deep hum, revealing the council and the High Chancellor waiting in silence. The Chancellor's gaze was unreadable. You have returned. The desert did not claim you. Lyra bowed slightly. The bond is real, my lord. The desert itself witnessed it. Ethan crossed his arms. We passed your test. Now what? The Chancellor studied him for a long moment. Then the law stands. The breath bond is complete. He raised his staff and the hall filled with golden light. A deep hum spread through the walls as ancient symbols appeared in the air around them, rings of light binding their names together in Zaylorian script. "It is done," the Chancellor said solemnly. "The Princess of Zaylor is one with the human Ethan Cole." But before anyone could celebrate, the massive doors of the chamber burst open. Soldiers rushed in, their armor black as obsidian. Behind them strode a tall figure in crimson robes, his eyes cold, his voice like metal. "Then the princess has betrayed her blood," the man said. Lyra's face froze. "General Cal," Ethan glanced at her. "You know him? He was—" "To be my consort," she said quietly. "Before the crash." Cale's gaze locked on Ethan. "A human took what was mine." "You polluted royal blood." Ethan straightened. "Funny I don't recall asking for it," the general sneered. "You mock the laws of our kind. You insult the throne. I should end this now." The Chancellor slammed his staff down, sending a wave of energy through the floor.
Enough! The desert has chosen!
"You will not question it." Cale's voice rose, cold and furious. "The desert chose nothing. It was tricked. And I will prove it with fire." He gestured sharply. Outside, the fleet that Ethan had seen earlier began to descend, darkening the sky with the thunder of engines. Lyra's hand gripped Ethan's. "He's going to attack the city." Ethan's instincts flared, years of engineering and battle training snapping into place. "Then we stop him before he destroys your world." Minutes later, chaos filled the skies. The fleet's cannons fired beams of red light, tearing through the outer towers. The ground shook under each blast. Ethan ran to the hangar with Lyra beside him. "You can't fly one of our ships," she cried. "Watch me," he said, climbing into the cockpit of a sleek silver fighter. "I built engines 10 times harder than these." Lyra climbed in after him, pressing her hands against the glowing controls. The ship roared to life. Together they soared into the red sky, weaving through enemy fire. The city gleamed below them like a wounded jewel. Cale's flagship loomed ahead, massive and black, its cannons glowing bright. "There," Ethan shouted. "That's our target!" Lyra's eyes narrowed. "Then let's end this." They dove straight toward the flagship. Energy bolts streaked past them, but Ethan's hands were steady. He remembered every movement, every calculation, every breath shared with her. Their thoughts moved as one. At the last second, Lyra extended her hands. The ship's core glowed brighter, responding to her life force. "Now!" Ethan yelled. The fighter fired its full energy into the flagship's core. A blinding flash split the sky. When the light faded, Cale's fleet was gone, shattered pieces raining like stars across the horizon. Hours later, as the city celebrated their survival, Ethan stood with Lyra on the palace balcony. The night air was cool and the lights of the city shimmered like starlight below. Lyra turned to him, her eyes soft. "You could have left after the trial, but you stayed," he smiled faintly. "Guess I got used to breathing the same air." She laughed softly, the sound like music. "Ethan Cole of Earth," she whispered, "you are no longer just human. You are part of Zaylor now." He looked out at the stars. "Then maybe it's time I start acting like it." But in the distance, far beyond the glowing towers, a new signal blinked in the night sky, a distress beacon, faint and unknown. Lyra noticed it too. "Another ship in trouble?" Ethan's lips curved into a quiet smile. "Looks like the universe isn't done with us yet." And as the stars shimmered over the endless sands, their story was only beginning. The night sky above Zaylor burned with streaks of silver and blue. The aftermath of the battle still shimmered in the distance, where the remains of General Kyle's fleet glowed faintly as falling stars. The people of Zaylor filled the city streets, chanting Ethan's name, the human who shared breath. A title that felt strange to him, yet somehow right. Ethan stood on the balcony of the royal palace, the cool wind brushing against his face. Below, the alien city pulsed with life and light. Floating lanterns rose like fireflies into the air, carrying the people's gratitude to the heavens. Behind him, Lyra approached quietly. She wore royal robes now, white and gold, her crown glowing faintly with symbols of light. But when Ethan turned, she smiled at him not as a queen, but as the same girl he had once found dying in a wreckage of smoke and fire. "You should be resting," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "Can't. My brain's still catching up to the idea that I saved a planet." Lyra stepped closer. "You didn't just save a planet. You changed it." My people will remember this forever. Ethan looked out at the stars. I didn't do it for them. I did it for you, she blinked, her eyes shining. And still, they will sing your name. The great hall of Zaylor filled that night with music, glowing lights, and hundreds of beings from across the system. The council gathered, nobles bowed, and the High Chancellor raised his staff before the crowd. Before the eyes of the ancients, he said, "We honor the bond that united two worlds. The breath that saved one life has become the bridge between species." He turned toward them. Ethan, Cole of Earth, stepped forward. Ethan walked slowly to the center of the hall. The light from the great crystals bathed him in silver. Lyra joined him, her hand finding his. The Chancellor spoke again, voice deep and calm. "Long ago, the breathright was our sacred promise. Life shared, not taken. You, human, have restored that meaning. You gave life without demand, and in return found love without fear." Lyra's eyes glimmered as she looked at Ethan. The Chancellor lifted his staff. "From this day, you are no longer just bonded. You are guardian consort of Zaylor, protector of its people, and life-bearer of its queen." The hall erupted in cheers. Ethan blinked. "Wait, life-bearer? What is that?" Lyra smiled, leaning close. "It means the one who keeps the breath of the queen alive. It means you." Ethan chuckled under his breath. "Guess I should have read the fine print." She laughed, and for a moment, all the weight of war and duty melted away. Later that night, they slipped away from the endless celebration, escaping into the quiet of the palace gardens. The air shimmered with soft blue fireflies, and the trees glowed faintly from within, humming like living crystals. Lyra sat on a stone bench, lifting her face to the stars. "When I was a child," she said softly, "I used to wish I could leave this world, to see other suns, other skies. But my father said the stars were too far, that our breath would fail before we reached them." Ethan smiled gently. "Looks like he underestimated both of us." She turned toward him. "Do humans always risk everything for someone they barely know?" He shrugged. "Only the stubborn ones." Her smile faded into something tender, quiet. "Then I am lucky to have found the most stubborn one in the universe." For a long time, they sat in silence. No words, just the sound of their hearts sinking with the rhythm of the wind. Then, a distant sound broke the calm. A faint alarm echoed through the night, followed by a shimmer in the sky. Ethan looked up and saw a blinking light high above the atmosphere, a distress signal. Lyra followed his gaze. "Another ship in trouble?" He nodded slowly. "Same signal pattern as before. Could be survivors."
Or something worse. Lyra stood.
"If the universe calls for help again, will you answer?" Ethan looked at her, his jaw set, his eyes full of quiet fire. "You already know the answer." She reached for his hand. "Then we go together." By dawn, the royal hangar roared to life. Engineers and soldiers saluted as Ethan and Lyra boarded a sleek, newly forged ship, built from human design and Zaylorian energy. Its hull shimmered gold and silver, engraved with a single symbol, two figures breathing the same air. "Ready?" Ethan asked, settling into the pilot's chair. Lyra fastened her belt, eyes bright. "Always." The ship lifted smoothly into the glowing sky. Below them, the people of Zaylor watched and cheered, their voices rising in unison. As the clouds thinned, Ethan glanced at Lyra. "You know, when I gave you that oxygen mask, I didn't think it'd end like this." Lyra smiled softly. "Neither did I, but maybe this was how it was always meant to be." He looked out at the stars, his voice steady. "Then let's see who else needs saving." The engines flared, blazing blue light across the horizon. The ship soared higher, cutting through the upper atmosphere into the endless dark. Far ahead, the distress beacon flickered like a heartbeat waiting to be answered. Ethan reached for the controls. Lyra placed her hand over his. Together they breathed once, slow, steady. One shared rhythm and then launched into the unknown. And so, the legend of the human who breathed for a queen spread across the stars. A story of one man's kindness, one woman's courage, and a single breath that changed the fate of two worlds forever.